Sometimes as entrepreneurs, we trick ourselves into thinking that the thing we really want to do with our lives isn't the thing that will be successful or make us money. Well, today's guest overcame that, and what came out of it was something that changed children's lives around the world. If you want to hear this story, then keep on listening.
Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm really excited for today for multiple reasons. Number one, because we are in Sedona and we are recording outside. So for those of you who are watching us on YouTube, watching the video version, hopefully the background looks nice. It should look nice. A bunch of red rocks out here. Sedona is one of my favorite places to go to, I think, in the world. And the second reason why I'm really excited is because we have, I always say Miss Katie Soy, because that's your Instagram handle, but I know you are married. So we have Mrs. Katie Soy on the podcast today, who is a coach for us. She is a scripting coach inside our $1 Million Mentorship, which is a year-long program we have for the Video Forex students who want to upgrade to a program that offers more support. And but we're not talking about that today. We're not talking about the coaching. We're talking about you and your journey and your story, because it's a good one. It's a unique one. But for those of us, or those of listeners who don't know who you are or quite what you do, can you just give a little background of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a storytelling coach and consultant. So with a corporate background and teaching background, I now work with entrepreneurs and business owners on how to integrate their powerful personal stories into their branding. So we create this disruptive storytelling, brand that really helps people stand out in their marketplace and their industry. So I love doing that. I also coach for you guys in the $1 Million Mentorship group, which you mentioned, and I'm a transformational coach for Jim Fortin. So lots of coaching, lots of consulting, and I love it.
Awesome. And one note for those of you listening that I forgot to mention, if you guys do hear like birds or cars or motorcycles, like which just went by, it is because we are outside. But yeah, so let's dive here first. Why storytelling? Why do entrepreneurs need storytelling inside of their business?
So storytelling, your personal stories are really the thumbprints of your brand, like the fingerprints of your messaging. And because you can have the same, values as another company, you can have the same things that you stand for, you can have the same things that you even do that other people in your marketplace do. But it's your personal stories, the things that have led you to where you are, that nobody else has. Right. So when you leverage those into your brand in the right way, it can really help you stand out, because that's the thing that nobody else has. Nobody else has your journey, your heart, and the things that have happened to you, positive, negative, right? Tough things, exciting things. Nobody's had those things happen to them. And so when you leverage that, it becomes really powerful and helps you stand out, so that your people who need you can find you.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. So if I hear you correctly, it gives you some uniqueness. Mm-hmm. It gives you an element that's just you.
Yeah. I also take a creative storytelling approach. So I've grown up in love with movies, in love with stories, in love with books. And I grew up as a creative writer. And so I take kind of a narrative fiction approach to storytelling, which makes what I do a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Sure, it's about your brand story. Everybody has one, right? But until you integrate those things that have happened to you personally, it's not going to be as powerful as it could be. And it's probably not going to be targeting the right people.
Right.
And you're not going to be standing out.
It makes a lot of sense. And if I hear you correctly, you're using someone's individual story into the brand.
Yes.
But we've used stories with messaging to teach as well. And I think story has so much power in sometimes explaining complex things, or maybe a concept that people don't quite grasp, but when they hear it in a story, it just hits differently.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
So without getting too into the weeds, our brains are wired to learn things through storytelling. That's how our history has been passed down, right? That's how our culture and traditions have been passed down around the world. And so there are tons of studies in neuroscience on how if somebody tells you something and they're telling you, Brandon, go do this, depending on how you function, that may not be the right way or the best way to get you to actually go do something and motivate you or persuade you to take an action or stop doing something. But if somebody tells you a story where you can put yourself, if you choose to, in the place of the protagonist or the hero, then you kind of come to that conclusion on your own. So it's really persuasive, and that's one of the that's one of the tools that you teach in your program too. That's one of the sleight of mouth patterns that you get into in your program that students use is metaphor, and that's essentially story. And I think everybody listening or watching can probably relate to when you've seen a movie and you're crying or you're laughing because something touched you.
Right.
And you see yourself, and it could be a comedy, it could be a superhero movie, and something touched you and is relatable, and you go, oh, that's the power of story.
Right. I totally agree. Let me know if this makes sense. I'm going to use a metaphor to explain this.
Fair.
So let me know if this makes sense. When I go, like, I kind of throw my wife under the bus a little bit here, but so hopefully she's not listening. But, with like all the work that we do, the personal development, all the stuff that I do, the coaching that I do, it's very easy to see other people like around you going like, oh, they haven't made this realization yet. So you try to like coach them or do whatever. My wife doesn't want to be coached by me, which I understand. Like she just doesn't want to be coached by her husband. I get it. And so what will happen sometimes, like, Jim Thornton will come to the house and he'll say the exact same thing to her, but she's like, oh yeah, okay. And like she's like, oh my God, thank you so much, Jim. And the way I view story sometimes is like, if we don't use story and we just try to teach sometimes, that's almost like the same scenario of me trying to go to my wife. Like people don't want to hear it sometimes, or it's too much, or it's not relatable. They're like, no, I don't get it. But then story is kind of like Jim Thornton in that scenario, who comes in and they tell us the same thing, but there's something different going on. They perceive it different. They're perceiving the information differently because it's maybe presented differently, or the lens in which you see that thing is different. And so it just lands differently. Would you say that's a fair way of describing it?
It's 100% accurate because, and I don't want to get too into this, but if you're internally referenced, right, which we talk about in your program as well, versus externally referenced, how you take information or advice, even if it's good advice, right? Like you're trying to give your wife, good, helpful advice.
Right.
But depending on how you process information, somebody coming up and telling you need this, or you do this, or, even in sales, like I can help you, like I really can help you. That's not persuasive to everybody. And you can have testimonials, which are great. Those are a form of stories, right? That's somebody else, saying, hey, this really helped me, or hey, this worked for me or my business or whatever. But when you tell a story about another character and you put your audience member, you invite them to, see themselves in that, and that's extremely powerful. And if you're not doing that, then you're probably not standing out as much as you could be, and you're not reaching as many hearts as you could be, the ones that need you. But the trick side of this is like, we can talk all day and go, this is so powerful, but when you tell personal stories, that's a different level of vulnerability in your business. Going, okay, I'm going to open this door to something that happened to me that was tough or traumatic. A lot of my clients have dealt with trauma. That's not the thing that you want to lead with, in a business conversation, especially. So it takes a lot of courage to do that. But it really, if you frame it in the right way, and it's a way to show your audience what's possible. We're not in ego. We're not in teaching and, you need to do this and this will help you. There's time for that too. But you're really inviting them to go, hey, look at what's possible for you.
Yeah, and I think what it does is it gives so much power to the things we may have classified in our life as bad or terrible, and it really helps people come out of victim mode, because as an entrepreneur, I've been through a lot of hard times, and things that I perceived as hard times in the moment. Like my big one is being $40,000 in debt, but now I understand how powerful that actually was for me, and I don't view it as a bad thing. In fact, when we go through hard times or things that old Brandon would view as hard times, I don't view them as hard times anymore, because I know the gift that it's giving me. It's giving me a great lesson, but it's going to give me a story that I can tell, and that story becomes the mechanism to deliver that lesson. And I think that's what you're kind of talking about, is it gives people, like, it takes their vulnerability in these things that could have been traumatic, but gives them more power to it to help other people through it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a great point. And that's really the key, and why I'm so passionate about this is because it reframes these things that have happened to us that society says is bad, or things that are, kind of a black mark on, your record or your resume or whatever. And it lets you reframe that, which brings you more personal power. And then it also kind of, lets you lend a hand to your audience and go, I can be the bridge to you reframing this in your life.
Right.
It lets people know that they're not alone,
Right.
whether it's debt or divorce or, abuse or these things that we just naturally want to hide.
Right.
It's coming out about those things and being open that not only heals you, because there's something internally that happens when you make that shift,
Right.
but it also shows your people like, hey, you're going to be okay.
Right.
And that is a powerful thing to share with other humans, to go, I see that you've gone through this, or that you're in this right now, and you're going to be okay. That's so powerful. And that goes to a deeper level of the work.
Yeah, I love that. With that said, let's transition to your story. And I do want to come back to the disruption side of storytelling as well. But how did you get into all of this? Were you just always a writer? Like from
I've
day
always
one?
been a writer.
You're just born and I'm a writer. Here I am, world. I'm a writer.
Exactly. No, I wrote my first book when I was 10 years old, because I had seen the movie Gone with the Wind.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally let my parents, my childhood was me begging my parents to let me watch movies that I wasn't allowed to watch, like Jaws and Gone with the Wind and these, huge movies. And so I grew up loving movies and just kind of in awe of movies and story. And I watched Gone with the Wind, and I was aware for the first time of the pain and the hurt. And I was also aware that I was being told a story. Like prior to that, I thought movies were real.
Yeah.
And books are real. And that line of reality versus fiction is still blurry for me. I'm not going to lie. but at the time I was like, wait, there's music and like there's costumes. Like I could tell what it was.
Because there's some truth to it all. I mean, it is real, right? Like you said last night, you're like, how do you not like Star Wars? By the way, I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. And you're like, there's so much shamanism in it. You would love it. So there is truth behind, because like in order for people to come up with these things, there has to be some level of thinking involved, but we can only think from a place that we know, which is truth. Like there has to be some level of truth in those things.
So that's what I learned. And so when I talked to my parents, and I was really confused about the pain in the movie, and my dad had to sit down and like had the conversation of, I knew what the Civil War was in a book, in my textbooks, but I didn't know what it was as third grade, second grade, whatever. So that was the first time where my dad was like, all right, this is what's going on, and this is what they're showing you. Yes, the movie is a movie, and it's a story based on a book, but these things actually happened. And so I was like, but none of my friends know, like none of my 10-year-old friends know that when they look up, like when we're learning about the Civil War, that it looked like this. So I wrote a book about... can't believe I'm saying this. I wrote a book, Brandon, called The Mystery of the Abandoned Shack, and it was my first story. Okay. And it was set after the Civil War, and it was about a family. I wanted to tell my own version of that story. It was about a family that was living at that time, and how they were dealing with what was going on at the time.
Right.
Because I had to just get it out.
Yeah.
So that was my first.
But wait, why are you like I can't believe I'm telling you, why is there resistance?
I didn't think we were going to talk about the Mystery of the Abandoned Shack on this podcast today, but it's a great story.
Gotcha.
Because that started me down this path. So in high school, I was working on novels, again, not published. None of these were there was nothing that happened with these, but I worked on stories about the Darfur crisis. Like I was constantly trying to find real things and real concepts, and then creating characters in fictional stories that could show lessons. So that's always been my heart. And I lost that path. I lost sight of that for a long time, because I thought, it's really hard to make it as a writer, as an author. I have to go do other things. And so that led to corporate path for almost a decade in copywriting and marketing, which, copywriting is a way to tell story in business. And then that led to people, my first clients were the ones going, hey, how can I talk about this thing that happened and do it in a professional way in my copy? And then that led to story consulting and coaching, where I'm at now. Gotcha.
Okay. There's one thing that you said that I think is really important for the audience to know, as you said something with lessons in story. And I think a lot of times people try to do and use story inside their business, and there's no lesson or point. And like, for example, like sometimes people get on a webinar and they'll just be like, okay, I'm supposed to tell a story here. So they just give a recap of their life, and it's like, why would anyone care about that? And what I work with people on when I help them with their webinars is like, the story needs to give a lesson that's relatable to what you're about to teach.
Yes.
Like it should give those ahas. It's not about just, I have 3 kids and I'm a family man and blah, 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 blah. Like, sure, there's some like you can connect to people if they're a family person as well, but there really needs to be that lesson there. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't quite grasp that yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that there's a lot of noise in the industry of going, oh yeah, tell a story. Like we see, people like Tony Robbins or Brendan Burchard have their same stories that they tell on every stage for years, which is great because you see the importance of story and having those, those what I call signature stories, ready to go and know how to tell them in, short segments and also long segments. But what you don't realize is they're so skilled at what they do that they are telling it with a point. They're always a lesson. They're always driving it home. There's strategy behind it. So just getting up and going, okay, I've got to tell a story because that's what people are doing isn't going to help what you're doing. So you have to be strategic about it in that you need to find the personal stories that relate to the values and the themes that your business stands for. Yeah. And what you try to teach your customers. You can't do one or the other. Yeah. You have to put those together so that and then you find a story. Yep. That relates to those lessons and tuck them in at those moments. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean it all makes so much sense. All right, let's hop back to your story to your story. You're in corporate and you're kind of doing all this stuff. You're kind of helping with copywriting and storytelling and helping people. So where do you go from there? So that's where we're at now. I started doing the copywriting and the coaching for you guys, and then started getting my own clients, and my own brand evolved to really helping people lean into the disruption in storytelling in a really powerful way. And I mean that in that we can shift other people's limiting beliefs through telling stories. And I know that you obviously your brand stands for this too. And then you can also be really compassionate and vulnerable in your stories and kind of like we were saying earlier, and show people what's possible and show them that it's going to be okay, whether it's business or life or whatever you teach. You can show them that you can help them. Okay. And you wrote a book recently. Yes. And it's been a book that you've wanted to write for how long? I got the idea in 2015. Okay. And we're in 2021. Yes. I want to talk about that. And my first question to you is, so right now you still have like clients and stuff like that. Why are you working with clients in corporate and all this stuff when you've had an idea of something that you really wanted to do back in 2015? What's going on there, Miss Soy? It's so formal. Back to Miss Soy. Yeah, so that's why I think I mentioned this at the beginning, that I've recently kind of come back to my own path, and which is writing stories. And so I still love helping clients with their storytelling. That's something that I'm super passionate about. That's just part of my heart is there for that work. And I published a novel in 2017, but again, with a different identity of, okay, this is on the side and this will never be what I do for actual real work. This is never going to be the focus of what I do. Right. This will always be something I do on the side of, at the time it was corporate or, whatever. But why is that though? Just a limiting belief. Well, I know, but let's go deeper with it. Like what is that limiting belief? The belief was that, so prior to 2020, when this all shifted, summer 2020, the belief was that it was hard to make it in that industry and have that be, and make an income that I wanted for my life from just that. Right. That it was hard or impossible or only people that had connections could do it. Right. So lesson like number 50 of this podcast so far is, and this is like kind of one of the main, why I want to talk about it was the main points of a lot of people listening, and the way the world has been, the world has been a certain way. Like how we make money has been done a certain way for a really long time. But the problem is the world is changing also really fast. And so with the new generation coming up, we have to be able to teach them there's other ways to make money. And I think you're kind of trapped in that belief of this is how you make money. You don't make money off of writing a book. Right. And people do. Right. And it's so much easier to publish books today. And we'll talk more about what you're creating now. But that's one of the things we have to start teaching our kids now is like, hey, there's so many ways to do this. You shouldn't be indoctrinated into what was or what you think is, because it's going to stop you from being in full alignment of what you should be doing, your purpose and all. And it feels like you're kind of experiencing that a little bit or a lot. A lot. Yeah. Or a lot. Yeah, it was a lot. And, I'm going to be really honest. This is why I'm here today. This is why we're sitting here. This has been a really, really recent shift for me. Yeah. Right. And so even with up to summer of 2020, my thought was, I'm going to carve this path outside of my master's degree, my corporate background, with my coaching business.
Right.
And that's going to be my North Star. And your audience is familiar with those with that terminology, but that's been my North Star. And if I can write on the side, great.
Right.
Up till 2020, that was what I was going to do. That was
you weren't
the belief.
making your main thing the main thing.
I was not making the main thing. So in 2020, during the pandemic, I started getting like little flashes of this story that had just been kind of dormant in my heart for years, and that brought up just a lot of stuff personally, like a lot of shifts personally, a lot of tough conversations.
What do you mean?
It brought up a lot of me knowing now that those beliefs were not, because last time, like when I got the idea for the book in 2015, I was still in that old identity. In 2020, when I started getting flashes of the story.
Old identity was what?
The old identity was that's only going to be on the side.
Gotcha.
People with big audiences.
I'm not
books.
a writer.
I'm not a writer for my main thing.
Right.
And yet knowing in my soul that I've been a writer since I was little.
Yeah.
It was so opposite.
Yeah.
Knowing that, so I was stuck in the old, the old belief, but in 2020, when I got those ideas, I'd done a lot of growth in those several years.
Right.
So I was getting these thoughts and going, wait, no, I know this is wrong.
Right.
I know this is not accurate. So there was this sense of cognitive dissonance of going, wait a second, that old identity doesn't feel right either. And so it kind of evolved from there. And I had a conversation that was really powerful that shifted the North Star. And that basically was brought to my attention, like, hey, what would be possible if your North Star was writing? And obviously I love helping people with their stories in business. I love it. But if that it shifted.
Yeah.
So the North Star was writing, and then I do this. And so then it was just a whirlwind. And the book came in within 4 days. I was drinking coffee, green juice, champagne.
All the best things.
Over like
Was there water mixed in there somewhere?
Somewhere, yeah. Very little food. And it was writing off and on, like constantly, like I wasn't sleeping right. I wasn't, like, it was just 4 days of absolute creation, and this came out, and I was like, okay, there's something here. And so then even when it came out, it was still like I could feel the identity shifting. Yeah. And I hadn't decided to publish until 2021, early 2021.
Okay. And I know I said I didn't want to go here, but I'm gonna do it because I don't want this to be the focus on me, because it's not. But do you want to tell the story of when that North Star shifted, and then I'll tell my version of it? Because I think this is gonna be really powerful for people, because I think a lot of people suffer from this of like, this is what's realistic, this is what is normal, this is what I can and can't do, and it stops a lot of people from moving forward with their dreams or their purpose and moves them out of alignment. So do you want to tell that story or your version of it?
Yes. So my version is I was on a call with you, who I'm lucky enough to have as my mentor and coach, on something unrelated. And I happened to mention, I don't know why, I was like, oh yeah, I've been having like dreams or something, like this old story, like this kid's book. And I was like, you have kids? I don't remember. Right. And you said, hold on, what's this story? And you were driving or something. It was just very at the end of a call. And I said, well, here's the story, like the plot of the story, this kid's book. And you said, hold on, what the fuck? Why have I not heard about this? And I was like, well, why would you have heard about it? Like, I don't even, And so I call that, I mean, it was a tough love conversation. It was, it was very real. And you were like, why are you doing what you do? And I was like, no, I love storytelling, which you know. Right. Yep. But you were like, but that's not, like, you're remembering who you are, and you're not choosing to be who you are. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good version of it. Here's my version. My version was, because you're a coach, I like help and mentor and work with all the other coaches. And we were on our call to help work on your business. And at the time, your business was like consulting and doing like, how do I grow this? How do I maintain? And we just spent an hour talking about all that stuff. I'm like, cool, we got a plan in place. And then I'm about to hang up. I was in my office, and I remember walking out of my office through the bedroom. And you're like, yeah, so I'm really glad I got the plan in place so that it'll make the money. I could just really make the money so I can finally write my book. And then in that moment, I realized what your business was a means to something else.
instead of just doing that thing now. It's like, wait a minute, hold on. What? Tell me about this book. And then you told it, and it was this beautiful story that is giving this like ancient wisdom, beautiful lessons for kids through, and I'll let you tell more about the book and stuff like that. And we dug deeper into it, and we realized a lot of the stuff that kind of we've already talked about, which is like, well, I can't make money, like limiting beliefs.
Right.
And then you took that and rewrote those stories and moved things off to the side and really trusted in like, this is what I'm supposed to do and this is what I want to do, and I'm going to go do it. And I'm not going to worry about the money or all these other things, and with a knowing of I'm going to be okay. And you did it. So from that conversation, how did things unfold for you? Gosh, these airplanes too.
I know. It's a good soundtrack. I just want to come back to one thing that you said that was really important that I'm glad you brought up, was I rewrote my own personal stories.
Yeah.
That is a key thing that I believe we have to do. I bring my clients through those exercises.
Yeah.
Because if you have not reframed the things that have happened to you that you viewed, in the same ways that the world tells you to, you can't come to market with those stories. Like, we cannot be disruptive until you've rewritten those personal stories. So you're totally correct. I had to rewrite those because you were like, these are all limiting beliefs. How do you want me to, shift you out of these? Right. Yeah. And there was just one after the other, and I saw it. Saw it. And so, so I just wanted to come back to that because that is a really important thing. Like, there's a lot of personal work that has to be done. You can't just be like, okay, I'm telling this story now. You can do whatever you want. Right. But then it comes across as you're an ego, or there's no point to your story, or you're telling it and maybe you actually still sound like you're a victim. Right. That comes off to your audience. People know. I've been at speeches and presentations and keynotes
you can feel
where the person was in victim mentality. They were clearly still in pain about things that had happened. And it was tangibly uncomfortable.
Well, it's because this story should tell that lesson that we talked about. And I feel like sometimes people tell stories too early, and the lesson hasn't been fully grasped by them yet. Yeah. And so they are still in that suffering. And it comes off as like that energetic victim feeling, Right. Like, it gets the audience to feel sorry for you versus them feeling empowered. Right. And we don't want that.
Exactly. And so there is that deep work that's part of it, that's not flashy, right? Okay, brand story. Everybody wants a brand story. Nobody wants to do the deep work in the dark, in the silence, to rewrite what those things are that then becomes the powerful brand. So that there was a lot of that going on. Yeah, and one thing you mentioned, it's that thinking mind, it's the tanal, the ego, that's like, I can't do that. Here's what's normal. Like, here's that whole all of that stuff, and you got to shut that off. Right. And that's what you're able to do. Yeah. And it was interesting because people have asked, like, they're like, well, you wrote another book in 2017. I was like, yeah, I did, but it was with that old identity of this is on the side, and it's just something that is, something, it's a hobby, right? The hopeful hobbyist. Yep. This is just what I'm doing. Right. For a fun thing. It was not my identity. And so I could feel the conversation with you shifted. It was way deeper than that. It was like, this is an identity shift. And then the writing happened, and then the editing happened, and then more thinking mind stuff happened. And then which, by the way, doesn't ever go away. Right. It's a constant battle. And I just finally, that's why I said earlier, I'm going to be honest, this is a really recent shift, which is why we're having this chat. But that was still happening when I decided I'm putting the launch date for the book on the calendar. I'm doing it myself. I'm not doing it through traditional channels at all. I'm not going through Amazon yet or Barnes & Noble yet. How can I get this out now? And it came out as an audiobook. I read it, I recorded it, and it's out on my own website. Not that it won't be out as in a physical book on Amazon at some point, but how can I get it out now? And once I made that commitment, then it was just kind of a tumble downhill into conversations I never thought that I would have, and connections that have come through, and beautiful story. And I think that's what's really interesting is like this idea came to you in 2015. You finally did it in 2020, 2021, end of 2020. Is that correct? Yeah. So 5 years. But once you made that shift, and also the commitment, it's also almost like an energetic thing. It's like the energy of you shifted to be like, this is not a side thing. This is the main thing. It all unfolded. And how long did it take to go through that whole process to like getting it out there and all that stuff? So I wrote it in summer 2020, and then between writing it and then launching it, it was 8 months. 8 months. Okay. So it took 5 or 6 years to do an 8-month process, basically. Yeah. But it can happen fast. And when you say launch, it's like from writing it to it
getting sales.
Yes.
Like, and there's so much that goes into it,
Yeah.
which is like, I'm assuming like the art, cover art, the pictures,
Yes.
the illustrations, the editing, and there's multiple books. There's an audio book, like from point to point, it took 8 months, which is not a long time at all.
No. And that set up, now there are at least 6 books in the series.
Yeah.
And now that's set up for, the next book can come out much more quickly. So it was just, but it was still like all these identity shifts going through that. And she, I remember putting writer back on my Instagram and going Katie Soy writer. I have my storytelling stuff on there too, but writer is right under my name.
Oh, interesting.
And
I didn't even realize that was off there or not on there.
It wasn't on there before.
Interesting.
I think I had coach or consultant. I had consultant on there anyway.
Well, but so why do you think that was?
It was the identity thing, the identity of this is what I have to do for work to make an income, and then all my writing will always just be the side and be a hobby.
Well, I mean, I get that. I'm just wondering why weren't you taking on that identity? Like, why did it need to be shifted? Because you were a writer, right? You've written books.
Yeah, I know. That's why this was so different. I think it was fear.
Yeah, fear of what?
Fear of not succeeding, fear of never having that dream come to fruition.
Yeah.
It was hiding.
Yeah, it's like the thing is like if I do this and I fail, it's like saying my purpose is a failure.
Yeah.
Like the thing I really want to do, the biggest part of me is just
right.
It's not valid. Like it's pushed down to the ground. That's scary.
Yeah, and now this just launched. Like this launched less than a month ago.
Yeah.
And we're still. And I'm working on the next part of this. But I think I told you this in a conversation. If this, how do I say this in the right way? It doesn't matter what happens with it.
Right.
I am a writer. I'm writing the series. It can help kids. It doesn't matter if it's huge or just people that I know.
It's going to be huge.
It is.
Yeah.
Right. But when I stepped into the identity, it was like, oh, it doesn't matter because this is just who I am.
Right.
And so whatever happens, like, great. So the fear
You're not
of failure,
attached to the results.
Yeah. The fear of failure stopped because I was like, okay, well, there'll be other story ideas. And this is the thing. You know this too. As soon as I put the date for the book launch on the calendar, the ideas for stories 2 and 3 came in, which I hadn't had. I had kind of, again, those little flashes.
Right.
But I didn't really know what they were. And then the week after the book launched, I called you.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's 6 stories. And so I got more. It's like once you get into action, things appear to support you, but you can't plan or think around those because you don't know until you're tumbling down the hill.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's the thing most people miss is they try to get everything in a line and perfect and mapped out. And it's like, yeah, just throw that map in the trash because it's never going to happen in the way you think it's going to happen.
Right.
And you said something too, which was as soon as you made that commitment, just things started to unfold. People started to appear. Opportunities started to appear. That stuff doesn't happen unless you take the action.
Right.
Why do you think it was that all of a sudden opportunities, things, people were popping up or getting in alignment with you?
Well, I was going to use the word alignment. I finally aligned with my deeper purpose and my identity. And then there was action taken. There's something that happens when those things come together.
Yeah.
It's magical. There's something that I can't explain.
I think exactly. I don't think we can explain it. I think there's a lot of ways people try to explain it, which would be something like some people might look at it and go like, well, I'll just say, here's how I kind of look at it is I think we all have a mission and a purpose here on this planet. A lot of them actually. So I think like when we're 5, our purpose at 5 is different than when we're 35, right? So I think the purpose always changes, but when you're at a certain age and you're living your purpose, it's like things line up to make sure that you're fulfilling on that purpose. But when you're not doing that, then it's like things get rough and hard and rocky and that doesn't seem to work. Because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would almost say that it felt pretty easy for you to go through this process. Like easy as in like, it felt like the universe was working with you versus against you. Would you agree to that?
Yes.
Okay.
It was a ton of work, but it felt very easy.
Right.
It felt very easy. And I was so happy. I was so happy, so exhausted.
That's the key. That's the thing.
But I was just like launch week, even the 4 days of writing it, I was like, I'm delirious. I haven't had normal food in 4 days, but I was so happy.
Yeah.
And then it was like, once you stepped into that, it was like the fear of, well, what if this never is? And it was like, who cares? Like, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'll be fine. And that's the idea. When I finally sat down and was like, well, how would I launch this if nothing mattered? if I wasn't trying to do this for whatever, trying to be the next Oprah or Liz Cooper, like if I was doing this for me and I wanted to get this story, because I truly believe that this story can help kids. I believe all my stories have kind of those themes.
Right.
And I was like, how could I get this out? And I thought, oh, well, I would just read it to my best friend's kids. And then I was like, oh, wait, I could read it to my best friend's kids.
Yeah.
I can read it and then put it out on my own website right now. That's it.
Yeah.
And go from there and see what happens. And the other thing that switched was we have this idea, kind of like corporate jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And, going to college, to make money and be successful. We have this idea that like, oh, if we want to be a writer, we want to be this person or that person, these things have to happen because this is how we see it in society.
Right.
But right now what's happening is I've had so much feedback from parents. I've had voice messages from kids around the world. The first week of launch, we had downloads in 14 countries.
Wow.
And I had parents like literally, DMing me going, hey, my 4-year-old wants to talk to you. Sorry, it's Friday afternoon. They heard the book and they saw your picture. And so I'm like, it was amazing.
Because you're the voice. You read your own book.
I read the book.
Yep.
And they were on the website. And I did have, beautiful, cover art and illustration to kind of give people, even though it's on an audiobook, give people an idea of like what the story is.
Who did
visually.
the art?
Jaje Ives, thank you for asking, my illustrator.
It was so good.
She took it to the next level. And so if you listen to the audiobook, you'll see scenes from the book on the website that she drew. And we'll have those at some point in the physical book when that comes to fruition. But yeah. But now it changed from this going, oh, you have to have, it has to be, a huge audience. It has to look like all these people that you see online. Well, now I'm getting requests for what's turning into a community, not just a book series. I'm getting requests for things from parents saying, hey, could we have like a 3-minute meditation? Could we have a conversation book? Because it started so many conversations.
Well, can we talk about what the book is about?
Yes.
And then we'll come back to that.
Yeah, perfect.
So just tell everyone, what is the book about?
So the book is called The Firefly in the Storm, and it's a really short story. It's under a 25-minute listen, and it is about a firefly who's an orphan and set on a tropical island, and she's adopted by grasshopper parents and grows up in a grasshopper village. And as you might be thinking now, if you weren't before, if you were a firefly and you grew up around a community that doesn't know why you glow or how you glow or what that even is, that does things to your identity. And so you see her go to school and get teased and bullied, and it's a story about her finding her own voice and being who she uniquely is. And it's also about not just accepting yourself, but there's a purpose and a need for you to be exactly who you are in the world. Because the ending is about she needs to be exactly herself in order to help. So
don't dim that light.
Yeah, it's all about owning your light and finding your voice.
You know what's beautiful about that, Katie? I just realized right now, I don't know why I didn't see it. That's what you had to do to put the book out there.
Yes.
You were letting like the external world and all stuff dim your light, and then it's like, whoa, you really are that. You really are her. I mean, you are to some level. I mean, that's what you had to do, really.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Accurate.
Accurate. Case like, okay. Enough about me and my limiting beliefs.
No, I mean, but it's funny because I got the idea in 2015 before this whole thing happened. And again, like I said, I've written books before, but it was the identity shift that made it different. But no, so it's for kids. It was initially, I thought it was for, the genre was for early readers, which is 8 and up. But we've had children from 3 to 12 and teenagers listen, and they love it.
My kids love it. I mean, and they're 4 and 7.
Mm-hmm. And some kids, will listen to like 10 minutes and then finish the rest in the car. Right. Some kids listen to the whole thing. The editing, we have a whole soundtrack for the book. So it's not just like an audiobook where, there's music at the beginning and music at the end. There's music and nature sounds, and like you can tell it's on a jungle island, and there's storms, like the Firefly in the Storm. Like, so
it sounds like a movie.
It sounds like a movie. Yeah. Thank you for that.
So tell me about the writing process, because I know how you talked about it, like it downloaded to you. So how did you come up with it? Did you sit in silence? Did you just start writing? Like, what? Tell me about that.
So since I was little, I've only gotten my stories in download form. So either in, I guess without realizing it, in silence or in dreams. So a story will come in a dream, or come in like if I'm quiet, or sometimes if I'm, trying, like kind of doing like your morning routine, like journaling, walking, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I'll get a download, and it's usually, it's hard to explain. There's usually a partial, like a framework for it.
Yep.
And then the rest of the story will fully download in if I'm paying attention to it's like I have to notice the framework.
Yep.
And get the clues, and then once I've done that, I just wait for the rest of the story to come in.
I love that. And I think people try to force things so much, like, what is my business and what's my thingy and what's the course going to be? And it's like, you can't force that stuff. And a lot of times you can't think your way there. You have to, like, that's why the silence is so important. It's the thinking mind, shutting it off and all of that stuff. And it sounds like that's kind of what you did. And
Yep.
I always use the example of when we journal, sometimes ideas just come in so fast that we can't write them down fast enough. And
Yeah.
it sounds like that was kind of your experience of just getting quiet and just letting it come. Like there's no forcing. It's just a beautiful process.
Yeah. And so, like I said, I had always thought there were a couple other stories in the series.
Yeah.
But then the day that I put the launch date on the calendar, I think it was the next day, I like knew, okay, there's going to be one with another character, or there's going to be one, you know, with a second character. And then the week of the launch, the same thing happened for 4 more. So
I love that.
And then the order and the order came in because they were kind of, it's like they bounce around. Any creatives, right? And your entrepreneurs are all creatives.
No, I have no creatives. All right, just kidding.
Are gonna get, it's like bouncing around. And then the week of launch, I went, oh, this one's number 2, and this one's number 3, and this one's gonna go here. And I got the format because some stories are about the firefly, and then some stories are about new friends that she meets.
Right.
And there's a whole theme on, you know, diversity and inclusion because she's obviously very different than where she grows up, and all of her new friends are characters that are not, you know, seen in her community. So there's butterflies and a bee now.
Yeah. Tell me about the bee.
You can talk about the bee.
No, I don't want to take credit for anything. So you tell, what's the bee?
We can do another podcast episode about the bee. No, each story brings in a different idea. So each story covers a different theme for kids. And so the first one is about owning your light and being who you are.
Right.
And not just, okay, I'm who I am, but like you have to be who you are. Because you find, you know, in the end of the story, she has the chance to save her entire school because they're stuck in a storm, right?
Yep.
Spoiler alert, in the dark. And she can't just be a fire, like she has to be as bright as she can be.
Right.
And so there's a beautiful lesson there for kids too. It's not just
so
like,
beautiful.
okay, hi, okay, I'm, you know, I guess this is just how I am now. It's way beyond that. So each story kind of covers what I call like a bigger, like a deeper purpose theme. So there's a butterfly where the butterfly can't fly because of mental health issues. And we're going to bring in concepts like anxiety and depression and define those for kids. There's a term in book 1, The Firefly and the Storm, where I define the term self-abuse for kids and like how talking critically about yourself is toxic. Yeah. Because I think kids can handle those types of conversations if we tell them the right way. Right. And so each lesson, it brings in a new character. So the bee, not inspired by anybody that we know.
You know, my nickname is Bee. Just kidding.
I didn't know that till after. Is about, she meets a bee who grows up with the, you know, very traditional hive mentality, thinking that it has to work in the hive because that's what its family and all of its cousins and everybody in the town, I mean, that's what they do. And this bee wants to be something else. Right. And so the bee is about that journey. And realizing that when the bee leaves the hive to go do what she wants, the hive doesn't fall apart. Right. Another bee just falls right back into the place that it would have done. And the bee is okay not doing the things that it thought it had to do from its family and its community. Yeah, and that's what I love about the books is that, and it's kind of what we talked about earlier with storytelling, it's a way to wrap really powerful lessons where if you just told someone a lesson, they wouldn't get it. Like if you just went up to someone and were like, hey, you don't need to go to do that corporate job, you should just leave, someone else will fill in and you should just do what you want. It's like, all these things are going to come up in their head, you know, like, well, I don't know about that, and my parents this, and blah, 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 blah. But with story, we're able to give those lessons without it being like a lecture, without it being like a boring tutorial, which, you know, we kind of go against. But I think what story allows us to do is to take these complex, I mean, sometimes they're not even so complex, but it's just, they're complex because of the way our mind works and what we think is normal. Yeah. But we take these and give them to kids. Like that's what you're doing. And that's what to me, that's what's so beautiful about this is you take these things that sometimes 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-olds will never learn until way later in their life. And you give them to kids so they never have to like go through that process. Like they live their life at a younger age to tell a story. I didn't really start seeing success inside the business until I really went to Landmark Forum. And that kicked off my whole personal development journey. And the last 10 years of my life have really been unshedding a lot of crap, for lack of a better word. And I think what your stories do is they give kids those lessons now, so there's not going to be as much unshedding at 30, 40, 50, or 60. And to me, it's like a generational transformation. It's like
they can take those lessons, give them to their kids and their kids and their kids. And it's beautiful.
Thank you. That's the goal, is to help them. And it's honestly to help, we talked about rewriting stories earlier for us, and it's to help kids either rewrite stories that they're hearing at school or in their family or, wherever, or to start creating those strong stories. So if somebody is judging them for being different, they're going to go, wait, no, this is who I am. And actually the world needs me just like me.
Yeah.
And
100%.
so that's the goal. So bringing up these stories around, mental health terms and, things like that. And then there's a whole book on failure and, trying and succeeding and not getting, what you want.
Yeah.
And just, beating your head up against the wall. That's the story. So the Firefly goes on that journey too. So they're all kind of centered around that. So there is a much deeper goal for this. So thank you for picking up on that.
It's really, I don't want this to come off weird, but I'm almost like jealous that you're doing it, because I'm like, this is so beautiful. Like the impact you're going to have. I'm like, I want that impact on the kids, because I just love kids. I think kids are the most beautiful form of humans on this planet, because they haven't been pushed down to, they're so creative. Everything's a possibility. They're not indoctrinated to, here's the world, kid. Like, here's the real people. This is, I think they haven't conformed to anything yet. And it's just beautiful that you're going to help stop that,
Thank you. That's the goal. And that I didn't see it until I started, that I think it is going to be a community, and there's going to be so many other, that's the thing, is I was just thinking, oh, well, writers look like this, people that make their living on by writing look like this, and that I don't have a million people in my audience, and I don't, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And now it doesn't even, first it stopped mattering as soon as I was looking at what it was costing. I think you asked me the question, actually. You said, what, because you said, that this can help kids on that call. Yeah. And I said, yeah. And you said, what is this costing the kids that it could help, that you're not stepping into this? Right.
And what was it costing? Because some people reached out to you. What were some of the feedback that you got from parents and kids?
We've had feedback from kids saying, oh my gosh, I get to go be myself at school today. We've had feedback from special needs children who listened and felt like they identified because she was so different. Yeah. I also had some feedback from a special needs parent who said, I feel like the story was written for me as the parent, because it's okay for my kid's light to shine differently than everybody else. Yeah. But when you framed that question, because you knew that there were limiting beliefs that I was holding on to, and then you identified a belief that I held deeply, which was that it can help. Right. And so for anybody listening, if you have that creative spark for something, whether it's a business program or a course or a creative idea or whatever it is, I would ask them the same question today. Yeah. What is this costing? If you sit on it for 5 years, what is this costing the people who need you?
Yeah. And when you wrote that book and you started sharing some of those lessons of this person responded with this, and had you not do that, those are the people that would be suffering because you didn't take the time to follow what you were supposed to be doing. And it is like a selfish thing. You would have been putting your own fear and insecurities over someone else's deeply rooted pain that you get to now help. And I'm so grateful and happy, and just to see this beautiful thing unfolding. And I remember when we first had this conversation, I was like, Katie, it's not just about because you kind of snapped into how's this going to make money? How's this going to make money? Right. And I said, it's not about the downloads. It's the way I look at, or the book. The book's like the opt-in page. The book, when you're doing a launch or something like that, you get people to opt in. You don't make money off the book. It's you build that community, and then there's going to be, and I was I don't know what it is, but there will be something else on the back end. And it sounds like that's what it's starting to develop, and that's what people are asking for, right?
Right. They're telling me what they need, and it stopped mattering when I was like, oh, it can help if one kid, then I'll do it. Yeah. That's when all the how kind of just fell apart, and I had been so focused on that, and I still can get into that, but I had been so focused on that for so long, and then it's it doesn't fucking matter. Yeah. Yeah. And now it's if I'm only helping these kids that are on the email list right now, their parents, then that's it. That's what I will be doing with these next books. But it's growing, and they're telling me what they want, and it's things that are amazing. Right. I didn't know we'd be getting requests for things like this. And this is a raw conversation, because this is very recent, as you know. This is all happening right now. So right.
So what is that going to look like? The community and different things. What are some of the things that people are asking for? You said meditations earlier.
Yeah. So I think we're going to do meditations basically from the character. So here's, I mean, talk about the power of storytelling. They're asking for meditations from the Firefly's perspective.
It's awesome.
So it'll be the character that's, I'll be reading it or having it done as the, so I'm like, it's just mind blowing to me that somebody would ask for that from the character.
Right.
So folks have asked for coloring books because even though it's an audiobook only, the artwork is so powerful. They're wanting coloring books. And then a conversation starter guide is the other thing that multiple parents have asked for, because they're like, oh, I had this conversation with my kid about being different or about being compassionate. And then you talked on your Instagram stories about somebody else who had a conversation about adoption because their kids didn't know what it meant for adoption. Like they didn't know what that meant. And then they didn't know what it meant to talk to bullies and be compassionate to people who are bullies. So they're like, can you like put something together? So I had multiple parents that were giving me feedback, and then they would see Instagram stories in my shares, and they're like, can you put all of this into one thing?
Yeah.
Can you do that for the next book? Like, could I have this before you have the next book come out?
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Because it does touch on these things. There's a really small reference in the very beginning to the grasshopper parents not being able to have kids. Somebody picked up on that. I think it was a 4 or 5 year old and said, Mom, what does that mean?
Right.
And so she explained, like, some families look different. Some families are not traditional. Like, not, this is how beautiful families can be.
Right.
And so I had never, it was such a quick reference, I would have never thought to put that in there. So these kids are telling me, what they need.
Yeah. And it's just amazing that's kind of what you're doing right now is what the podcast stands for. It's just like new ways to make money, but do it in ways to help people, and the what you're doing now. And I think part of it just, I look back at the journey, and I think part of the reason why you didn't write it in 2015 is obviously because you had lessons to learn and stuff like that. But I also think that the way in which it was launched, the way in which the community starting to form, had you done it in 2015, those wouldn't have been opportunities. And I think we have opportunities right now where we can create money off of anything. Like most people look at the traditional, and you kind of did that too, the traditional route of here's how authors make money.
Yeah.
And there's no, like, I think there's such a lack of critical thinking or knowledge to all the tools and ways that are, or things that you have available to you with technology and stuff to make money. Back in 2015, would people have been asking for downloads of meditations? I don't know, maybe not.
I don't know. I honestly don't know, and I think you're absolutely right. And like I said, we may have this available in traditional channels at some point, because I do want there to be a physical book in the world. Yeah. This was just starting, and then this is what came out of it, which was amazing. Yeah. But people really resonated with the audiobook. Even people who are like, oh, my kids have never listened to an audiobook, but they're like, it's like a movie in the car on the way to school.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what, my kids do, is like when we go on long trips or whatever, I just go to YouTube and I just type in audiobooks for kids, and they just listen to stories the whole time. They just love it.
I had one parent let me know that she has an 11-year-old daughter who basically went to school and hides her hair. And she came home and was like, she listened to this story, and she's 11, and I was thinking, like, tweens, they're not gonna what? They're too cool for this. And she said, oh, Jem, the Firefly, that's like me. Like, she's hiding at school. Like, I need to go be myself and just be me.
It's beautiful.
And she's 11 years old, and I was like, oh my God. And so little things like that are just inspiring the next books. And so right now the next one's going to be an audiobook, and I might do the physical book once I have 2 or 3 kind of done and do it as a series.
Gotcha.
So they all come out at once. But even my illustrator came to me in just a beautiful way, and that was so inspired, like divinely inspired.
How did that happen? She
was a mutual friend of mine, and I knew I needed something visual to ground it. And then I was even overthinking that, because I was like, well, it's an audiobook. I don't need it. I could just put it on my website. Like, I don't need to invest in this. I don't need to spend this. But something was pushing me. So I made a list of artists that I knew, and her style really spoke to me, but she hadn't done anything like this that I was aware of. And so I basically left her a series of what I call verbal vomit messages on a walk one day. And was like, I don't know what you do, but here's what I need. Will this work? And she messaged me back that it was completely aligned, and I had no idea that she was working on projects that were totally aligned with this. And she wants to actually write her own stuff. She's been an illustrator and wants to be a writer. So hopefully I'm not telling any of her secrets here. But so it just completely was this beautiful alignment, and she was like, I would love this. And then she got the vision for what it became. And when I first saw those, I was just, in tears, because I was like, this is what I needed to see this.
It fits so well.
And the kids have seen, I think in the physical book it'll make more sense, but on the website, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's how we talk about it on social too.
I love it. Yeah. So where can people go to get the book, learn more about it, all that good stuff?
They go to my website, so katiesoy.com. You'll see the tab at the top, or go to katiesoy.com/Firefly Stories.
Firefly Stories.
And
okay.
that's the first episode is up.
And what's the title of the book?
The Firefly in the Storm.
Okay, beautiful. I have some rapid fire questions for you. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Your words said yes, your face said no.
I don't have a filter, so.
There's just 3 of them.
Okay.
So in 5 years, where do you think you're going to be?
Writing full time.
With what? Like these series, or is there something else?
Definitely this series, and I'm hoping for more stories. I know more stories will come in.
Okay. Do you believe entrepreneurship should be taught in schools?
Yes, 100%.
And why?
Because they don't teach you. I mean, it's so creative, and it's life skills. I feel like entrepreneurship is life skills.
Yeah.
And if you learn how to manage your own books and do your own investing and learn how to sell and market and communicate to people, that helps you in life.
Well, it's even the personal development side of it too.
Yeah.
Is because that is entrepreneurship. It's just so much personal development, changing your identities, shifting your identities, like you talked about. Last question is: do you make decisions based off your head or your heart?
It's still both, but it's way more of my heart now.
I think it needs to be both. I would agree to that. Beautiful. Katie, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And for those of you who have not done so yet, go ahead and leave us a review on iTunes and hop into our Facebook group called the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast and let us know your biggest aha or tear moment from this episode. I saw Katie's eyes get water up a few times.
Don't tell them. People won't know.
I was like, what can I ask to get her to cry? But if there was a moment that you guys would love to share, head into that Facebook group and let us know, because this was a beautiful, beautiful episode. So Katie, thank you so much. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.